When we're playing cards during the holidays, my cousin, Owen Thompson, suddenly calls it boring and tells us that he wants to make a big gamble. Then, he tosses his BMW keys onto the table and asks if we're bold enough to follow up with our own bets. I know that Owen is just trying to flaunt the fact that he's bought himself a BMW. Everyone is stunned by his antics. They quickly say, "This is just a game. We're not going to bet anything else." After that, they start complimenting how amazing Owen is to be able to own a BMW at such a young age. I, on the other hand, hesitate to do so. After all, my trump cards are a set of chaos. Having gotten his ego boosted by the compliments, Owen is about to flush the deck when I put my car keys belonging to a cheaper, run-down car. Then I mumble, "I'm going to follow up with a bet of my own." Everyone falls silent at my statement. They just stare at me in disbelief, whereas Owen widens his eyes out of shock. Almost immediately, things grow heated between us. The moment both of us place our car keys onto the betting table, our feeble relationship as cousins is quick to vanish. But I don't regret my decision. Owen is the one who has decided to bet his BMW, after all. Since he's capable of being this ruthless toward his own relatives, I might as well not give a damn about his feelings at all. Owen lets out a cold chuckle before saying, "How much do you have in that pocket of yours, huh? You really think you can scare me, chump? I have a BMW, for crying out loud. You should gather more money first before placing your bet. Don't go around scamming others with just a shitty car." I stared at my cousin, Owen Thompson. I hated playing cards with him. It was meant to be a laid-back holiday game, but he threw his weight around and bet big on every hand. Anyone who'd gambled before understood how it worked. When one person was short-stacked against a deep pocket, they had no dignity, just a slow grind into the felt. While the rest of us were betting $1 or $2, Owen jumped straight to $500. We tried to talk him down, saying we were family and shouldn't be playing that big. But he simply asked innocently, "What? $500 is a lot now." Owen was picking on us because we were broke and couldn't call his bets. He hadn't come to play. Instead, he was there to humiliate us. I knew my Buick was no match for his BMW. So I turned and called my girlfriend, Amelia Moore, over. We were getting married soon, and she was wearing the gold jewelry I had given her. "Put the necklace and the bracelet on the table," I said. Amelia glanced at me. Without asking what cards I had, she took off the necklace and bracelet and set them on the table. At that moment, a single thought flashed through my mind. What more could a man ask for in a partner? "Is that enough for you? Ready to show your cards?" I asked Owen seriously. Owen's expression changed instantly, and he clenched his teeth. Clearly, he hadn't expected me to push back. "Don't say I didn't warn you, Ethan. Losing a BMW means nothing to me. But if you lose everything, how's your family supposed to survive the next 5 years?" he mocked. I shook my head. "We'll manage our own way. Besides, didn't you say earlier at dinner that I wasn't bold enough?" Owen's expression darkened even further. I had never done anything to offend him. But earlier at dinner, he had talked down to me just because I didn't make as much money as he did. He even said I didn't have the guts to do anything big unlike him. That was why he was the boss. While Owen was talking, my dad handed him a cigarette and even lit it for him out of courtesy. Yet he didn't even bother to cup his hand around the flame. People from the city or younger folks probably didn't understand what that meant. But where we came from, if an elder lit a cigarette and the other person didn't bother to cup the flame, it was a sign of disrespect. So, Owen had publicly humiliated my family. Right then, everyone looked at Owen nervously, waiting to see if he'd show his cards. He took a deep breath before saying, "If we're going to play, let's make it bigger. That's the only way this gets interesting." Having said that, he set his cards face down on the table, covered them with a plate, and walked out. The rest of us stayed seated and watched as he went to the trunk of his BMW. He pulled out a small wooden box, carried it back inside, then set it on the table. A beat later, Owen opened the box, and inside was nothing but cash. $300,000, Owen said, his tone dripping with arrogance. "Are you in or not?" By then, we had already drawn the attention of the older members of the family. My uncle, Peter Thompson, saw what was happening and panicked. He snapped at Owen. "Have you lost your mind? That money is set aside for the holidays. Are you seriously putting it on the table?" Yet Owen sat down with a grin, utterly unconcerned. "Don't worry. I can afford to play. The real question is, can he?" I immediately understood what he was up to. In three-card brag, there was a cap to keep things from getting out of hand. But when the game started, Owen had shown off, insisting there be no limit. He meant to keep raising the stakes higher and higher until I couldn't keep up and lost everything. Sure enough, he taunted. "Don't tell me you can't come up with the cash. Even if you can't, everything you've already bet stays on the table." Uncle Peter caught on right away. This time, he didn't even bother hiding his amusement. He chuckled and turned back to his game of rummy, not sparing me another glance. I clenched my fists and said nothing. There was no way I could come up with $300,000 in cash. Out of nowhere, Amelia spoke up. It's fine. We'll put the house on the line. In an instant, every head in the room snapped toward her. Uncle Peter froze. A cigarette hung from his lips while his hand hovered over the cards. Owen, on the other hand, stared at us blankly, his expression caught between anger and unease. Both of them were trembling slightly. At that point, even the older relatives stopped playing. They quickly gathered around us, saying the stakes had gotten too high. Panicked, my dad rushed over and slammed his fist into my shoulder. He shouted, "Have you lost your mind? Are you trying to bankrupt this family?" As he yelled, he tried to see my cards. But I held them down tightly and refused to let him. Those who knew the game understood that a person should never show their cards to anyone. Their reactions could give everything away. I had 3 kings, and only 3 aces could beat that hand. Owen was the one who started all of this. Every seasoned player knew what a hand like this meant. Either I walked away with nothing, or blood would spill. Amelia looked at Owen, calm and steady. Our house is worth $500,000. That's $200,000 more than what you've bet. Are you in or not? Have all of you lost your minds? Uncle Peter roared. He lunged across the table, trying to shove our chips back. Then he barked at me. Don't provoke Owen. He's a big-time businessman and doesn't want to hold it against you. Apologize to him now. Do you not want him to help you get ahead someday? Without missing a beat, I grabbed him and snarled, "Put it all down." Uncle Peter hadn't expected me to snap at him like that. He flinched, and a shudder ran through him. Through clenched teeth I hissed. When he was betting $500 a hand, none of you said a word. When he was bragging at the dinner table, you had my dad light his cigarette for him. He was the one who threw his car keys in first. I'm seeing this all the way through. Uncle Peter stared at me stunned. Then he snapped. How dare you speak to your elders like that? I looked at Owen, my voice icy as I said, you've got 2 choices. Either you put in another $200,000, and we show our cards, or you walk away and forfeit everything you've bet. There's also a third option. We call the whole thing off, and everyone takes their bets back. But you must apologize to my dad. The room fell silent at once. Everyone had seen it earlier. How Owen held his cigarette between 2 fingers and let Dad light it for him. Yet, at the time, no one spoke up. In fact, I'd noticed the look on Uncle Peter's face. He'd been almost smug about it. Just then, Owen let out a bitter laugh. You've got a lot of nerve, huh? Acting like this in front of the whole family. I shook my head. The second you put your car keys on the table, we weren't family anymore. Owen fell silent for a beat, then let out a cold laugh. Fine. Don't blame me for pushing you then. You're the one who wanted to stay in, right? Just then he picked up his cards and flipped 2 toward me. It was a pair of queens. As soon as I saw them, a wave of relief washed over me. Still, my expression remained tight. Owen tilted his chin up and said smugly, so, what do you think? Did I hit 3 of a kind? In 3-card brag, deliberately showing part of a hand like that was common. It was meant to rattle the other player and read their reaction. But Owen couldn't scare me. Even if he really had 3 of a kind, it still wouldn't beat mine. I had been worried that he might be holding 3 aces. Now, it was clear that fear had been pointless. That cocky stunt of his had only driven him into a dead end. Even though I was completely at ease, I gritted my teeth and said, You're bluffing. Are you in or out? Owen stared into my eyes, as if trying to read my mind. In this game, it was all about nerve and performance. Even at that point, he still couldn't decide. Uncle Peter interjected. Don't do it. He's obviously not scared of your hand. Can't you tell? If I fold, I lose the BMW and the $300,000 I already put in. He's bluffing. Owen snapped, his features twisting with rage. Normally, the relatives would all be talking at once, throwing out advice from every direction. But now no one dared say a word. Until the cards were revealed, there was no telling what was real and what wasn't. Owen nervously scanned the faces around the table. Every bet had been his idea. If he backed out now, he'd never live it down in front of the family. At last he waved his wife, Kylie Reed, over. Come here. She reluctantly walked over to the table. Then he told her to place her gold jewelry on the table. Hers was worth far more than Amelia's, after all. But unlike Amelia, Kylie refused to take hers off. Owen immediately grew tense and showed her his cards. The moment she saw them, her face lit up with joy. She hurriedly stripped off all her gold jewelry and set it on the table. Come on, let's take this all the way, she said with a grin. Don't come crying when you lose. Everyone here is a witness. Anyone who backs out deserves what's coming to them. So, are you saying we should reveal our cards? I asked. Kylie shot back. Why should we? We're taking this all the way. The greed on her face was unmistakable. However, no one had any chips left. Suddenly, Kylie pulled off her diamond ring and set it on the table. This ring cost me $50,000. I shook my head. I'm not taking the ring. That thing's worth $100 at most. What the hell are you saying? Kylie snapped as she jabbed a finger at me. Do you even know what this is? This is designer. A wry smile tugged at my lips. I don't care what it is. To me, it's worth $100. Kylie was about to retort when Owen cut in. Then I'll put my house on the line too. In an instant, a gasp rippled through the room, and Uncle Peter jumped to his feet. Have you lost your mind? That house is located downtown. It's worth $1.5 million. I'm not messing around, Dad. Owen replied with a sneer. Whatever I put in, he has to match. That's the rule. Every bet has to top the last one. So Ethan, do you have the money to keep up? I fell silent. There was no way I could come up with that much money. Owen saw through me instantly. He burst out laughing and gave my shoulder a slap. There are things you just can't afford to play with. Truth is, I'm picking on you because your stack's small. And what are you going to do about it? I can come up with this kind of money easily, but even if you put your life on the line, you couldn't scrape together that amount. Kylie sneered. So are you in or out? If you're not showing your hand, we'll take that as a fold. That was the gap between the rich and the poor. The wealthy could casually toss in what a poorer man couldn't scrape together, even if he risked everything. Every call became heavier and more suffocating. Just like Owen said, he was pushing me around because I had no money. I glanced nervously at Amelia and Dad. At that point, Dad's face had gone pale. He couldn't understand how a simple game had spiraled this far out of control. Right then, Amelia spoke up. My parents left me a house. It's not in the city, but it's still worth $500,000. I grabbed her hand at once, my voice shaking with urgency. No. I bought our house and the gold jewelry. If I lose it all, we'll break up. You won't get dragged into it. But if you stake your family's assets on my hand and I lose, I'll bankrupt them. Amelia replied coldly. We're not backing down. If we do, we'll never stand tall again. I trust that you wouldn't do this unless you were sure. I trembled uncontrollably, but with joy. I knew I was going to win. All of this was just an act meant to make Owen think I was nervous, too. But from Amelia's side, it was different. She had no idea what I was holding, and still, she was willing to stake everything on me. Not all houses are equal, Owen said, his tone dripping with mockery. You're still $1 million short. How do you plan to make that up? If you can't, then get the hell away from the table. Stop whining like sore losers. I took a deep breath before saying, the neighborhood back home is getting redeveloped. There are 4 of us, my parents, Amelia, and me. Every dollar of our payout is yours. At that, Kylie covered her mouth and chuckled. What, you think this is some booming city? This is just a rundown rural area. 4 of you would only get $600,000, so you're still $400,000 short. Then she turned to Owen and added, I'm not trying to insult your relatives, but look at him, scraping and clawing together every last dollar. Is he even going to come up with it? The way you're scrambling to piece together this bet is pathetic and embarrassing. Sometimes, respect is given to you. Other times, you're the one who loses it yourself. If you can't cover the bet, just fold, Owen said flatly. Seeing that I couldn't come up with the money, Uncle Peter let out a breath of relief. A beat later, he turned to Dad and snapped. Your son doesn't know his place. Now look. He can't even keep up. Everything he's already put in is gone. Dad stood rooted to the spot, his face ashen. He swallowed hard and turned to me. What were you thinking? What else are you going to put up? You've gambled away everything our family has. Yet I said nothing and tapped away on my phone, taking out every online loan I could get. Once I was done, I set the phone down in front of Owen. The available funds shown on the screen were $400,000. He froze for a second. How do you have that kind of credit? I borrowed from 8 different lenders and used my car as collateral for all of them. Initially, I'd planned to take out loans for my wedding. I had applied everywhere to compare the interest rates, building up credit lines with each one. I hadn't expected it to come in handy like this. Owen let out an exasperated laugh. Then he pulled out a cigarette and held it between his teeth. You've really outdone yourself. Taking out online loans just to gamble with me. You know that if you can't pay that back, it's over for you, right? I know. But it doesn't matter. I'm seeing this through with you to the end, I replied. Owen asked, you really want to take this until we both go down, huh? When my dad lit your cigarette, you couldn't even be bothered to cup the flame. I shot back. At that, Dad panicked. He rushed over and grabbed my arm. Owen's a big-time businessman now. He doesn't sweat the small stuff. Stop this. There's no need to push the stakes this high. He didn't mean it. I meant it. Owen roared. The color drained from Dad's face at once. He urged, there are so many people here. Please don't embarrass me, okay? But Owen's patience snapped. He jabbed a finger in Dad's face and spat. Your son started this. You don't have any dignity to embarrass. If my dad weren't your brother, you think I'd even bother with relatives like you? Yeah, I didn't cup the flame on purpose. You should be grateful I let you light it at all. Bunch of broke losers. The insults kept piling on. and Dad's expression grew darker by the second. Nearby, Uncle Peter let out a sigh, putting on a show as he said, "Owen, how can you talk to your elders like that? Don't mind him, everyone. He's had too much to drink. He's always like this in public, throwing his weight around just because he's made some money." I shot Uncle Peter a glance. He sounded like he was scolding Owen, but in reality, he was propping up his son. Owen slammed his hand down on the table, teeth clenched as he snarled. "You jerk. You really bet everything just to force a showdown with me, huh? Fine. Let's see your cards." Just as he was about to flip his cards over, I asked, "When did I say I was going to show my hand?" Owen froze, along with everyone else. He stared at me blankly. "You're not revealing them now." I shook my head. That was the most terrifying part of the game. The first one to break and call for a showdown had to put in an extra stake. But in this game, the stakes only escalated. We were already this deep, so anyone who wanted to force a reveal had to put up another $1.5 million. I shrugged. "If you can't take it anymore, go ahead and show your hand. But put up the extra stake first." Owen glared at me, fury blazing in his eyes. "You're just trying to push me into another bet. Even if I match you now, you won't be able to keep up in the next round. You just want to force me so I fold. Think whatever you want. I'm just telling you I'm not revealing my cards. If you don't match, you're folding," I said flatly. Kylie panicked and snapped at me. "You jerk. Just show your hand already. Why are you trying to force us into another round?" I glanced at her but said nothing. With everyone watching, the more she lashed out in panic, the more she humiliated herself. Owen's breathing grew ragged with anger. "Fine. I'll put my factory up as collateral. It's worth $1.5 million, isn't it?" he hissed through clenched teeth. Kylie shoved him at once. Her voice rose as she asked, "Why are you still betting with him? He's playing dirty. He's just trying to drag you into another round. If I fold now, everything I've already put in is gone." Owen barked. By then, Kylie had completely lost it. She slammed her hand on the table and shouted, "What if he's got 3 kings or 3 aces? What then? And what if I fold now and it turns out he was bluffing?" Owen shot back. "Do you really think someone would risk their entire fortune just to bluff you?" Kylie cried out. Owen shook his head. "Keep your mouth shut. You don't understand this game." I looked at him. The truth was he wasn't wrong. That was how this game worked. People with nothing in their hand would still go all in, just to scare their opponent into folding. It was truly a game of nerve. But he had overlooked one thing. I hadn't been bluffing at all. Owen was the one who had put his car keys on the table, and the one who decided to raise the stakes this high. The more he bet, the harder it became to walk away. He'd tossed his BMW keys just to flex, only to dig his own grave. "Are you going to show your hand now?" I asked Owen. He fell silent. The smug confidence he had shown earlier finally cracked, and worry and tension crept onto his face. "If I don't show my hand, are you going to show yours on the next move?" he asked. "Or are you planning to drag your whole family into debt, just to keep playing and force me into another round?" I answered calmly, "I'm not telling you. Just decide if you're showing or not." Owen glanced at Uncle Peter and Kylie, clearly uneasy. He hesitated as he asked them whether he should show his hand. It was obvious that Uncle Peter wanted to take a swing at me, but his son had started all of this. So he held back his anger. "Show your hand. If you don't, he'll find a way to come up with the money and force you into another round. Once he does, you'll have to borrow money too just to keep up before you can finally show." At that, Owen drew in a deep breath and nodded. "I know you don't have 3 of a kind. You're bluffing. But remember, there's a reason I'm the one who made it in life. First, I've got the guts. Second, once I make a decision, I follow through. So I'm not showing my hand. If you want to, you'll need to put up another $1.5 million. I sucked in a breath. In fact, he made the right move. He was far wealthier than I was after all. I was already in debt, but he wasn't. He could keep pushing until I simply couldn't match the bet. I knew it was time to show my hand. I had to raise another $1.5 million. There was no dragging this out any longer. If Owen chose not to show his hand in the next round, I'd be finished. There was no way I could raise that kind of money again, even if it cost me everything. Just as that realization settled in, Owen let out a cold laugh. "Oh, and I'm adding another $1.5 million. You'll need $3 million to stay in." $3 million. The words hung in the stale air of the living room, heavy and suffocating. It wasn't just a number anymore, it was an execution order. Owen wielded his wealth like a bludgeon, slamming it down on the makeshift betting table to crush whatever dignity my family had left. The silence that followed was absolute, broken only by the low hum of the refrigerator in the kitchen. Dad suddenly snapped out of his paralysis. He lunged at the table, his hands shaking violently as he tried to sweep the pile of chips, keys, and jewelry away. "That's it. The game is over. We fold. Ethan is drunk, he doesn't know what he's saying. Don't touch the table. Owen roared, slapping Dad's hand away with a vicious strike. The sharp smack echoed off the walls. Dad stumbled back, clutching his wrist, his face a portrait of utter humiliation. The bet is placed, Owen sneered, pointing a finger at my father's face. Your son wanted to play in the big leagues. Now he's going to pay the admission fee. If you mess with the pot, I'll have the cops here for theft before you can blink. I stood up, pulling Dad gently behind me. My blood was roaring in my ears, a cold, calculated fury taking over. Don't touch him again, Owen. Owen leaned back in his chair, lighting another cigarette. He took a long drag and blew the smoke directly across the table toward me. Then put up the money. Ethan. 3 million. You wanted to drag me into a showdown? Here I am. Where's your capital? Kylie crossed her arms, a vicious, triumphant smile plastered on her face. He doesn't have it. Look at him. He's already drained online loan apps just to scrape together his last bet. He's tapped out. According to the rules, if he can't match the raise, he folds. We take the pot. She reached out to grab Amelia's gold necklace and the pile of cash. I didn't say I was folding, I said, my voice dead calm. Kylie's hand froze inches from the jewelry. She glared at me. You don't have the money. I need 30 minutes, I said, keeping my eyes locked on Owen. Uncle Peter let out a loud, mocking scoff. 30 minutes? What are you going to do, rob a bank? It's a holiday, you idiot. Banks are closed. You can't even mortgage your rundown house in 30 minutes. Just admit defeat and apologize to Owen. Maybe he'll be generous and leave you the car so you can drive your broke family home. I ignored him. I pulled my phone from my pocket and unlocked the screen. You've got 30 minutes, Owen said, checking his Rolex with an exaggerated flick of his wrist. But I'm not sitting here waiting for nothing. If you can't produce $3 million in exactly 30 minutes, you forfeit everything on this table, and you get on your knees and apologize to me in front of the entire family for wasting my time. And if I do produce it? I asked. Owen laughed, a harsh grating sound. If you do, I'll show my cards. But we all know you're bluffing to buy time. Make your little phone call, Ethan. Let's see who's coming to save you. I dialed a number I had saved in my contacts for 2 years, a number I had promised myself I would only use if the sky was falling. I work as a forensic auditor for a mid-sized accounting firm in the city. 2 years ago, I was assigned to audit a local commercial real estate developer. During my late-night digging, I uncovered a massive, sophisticated embezzlement ring operating within their supply chain. It was bleeding the company dry. I brought the evidence directly to the owner, a man named Marcus Thorne. I saved him nearly $8 million. When he offered me $250,000 as a reward, I turned it down, telling him I was just doing my job and didn't want to compromise my license. Marcus had looked at me for a long time, then handed me his personal card. There are 2 types of men in this world, Ethan, he had said. Those who worship money and those who control it. If you ever need a mountain moved, you call this number. The phone rang twice. Ethan, a deep, gravelly voice answered. Mr. Thorne, I apologize for calling on a holiday. You wouldn't call if it wasn't important. What do you need? I'm at a table, I said, keeping my voice level. 3-card brag. I have the absolute nuts. My opponent is trying to bully me off the pot with a capital raise. I need $3 million to call his bet and force a showdown. There was a brief pause on the line. You're sure about your hand? I am holding 3 kings, I said. A collective gasp echoed through the living room. Uncle Peter dropped his cigarette. Kylie's jaw went slack. Owen's eyes twitched, a flash of pure panic crossing his features before he forced it down into a sneer. He's lying, Owen muttered to his wife. He's just saying that to scare me. On the phone, Marcus chuckled. 3 kings. And what is he holding? He hasn't shown. But he's desperate. He's throwing real estate and factories into the pot to avoid flipping his cards. Where are you? Marcus asked. I gave him the address of my hometown. It was about a 20-minute drive from the city borders. I'm buying your action, Marcus said. I put up the $3 million, I take 50% of the total winnings. Deal. Deal, I said without hesitation. Give me 25 minutes. The line went dead. I put the phone face down on the table and leaned back in my chair. He's on his way. The next 25 minutes were pure psychological torture, though not for me. At first, Owen and his side of the family tried to keep up their mocking facade. Uncle Peter paced the room, muttering about how I was an ungrateful brat putting on a theatrical performance. Kylie continuously checked her makeup in her phone's reflection, trying to feign boredom. But as the minutes ticked by, the atmosphere in the room shifted. Owen couldn't sit still. His leg began to bounce beneath the table. He lit 3 cigarettes back to back, crushing them out in the ashtray before they were even half-smoked. The smug arrogance that had radiated from him all night was evaporating, replaced by a restless, sweaty paranoia. He kept looking at my cards, which were still lying face down, protected by my hands. 3 kings. The claim hung in the air like a guillotine. If I really had 3 kings, Owen was dead. Only 3 aces could beat it. The mathematical probability of him holding 3 aces while I held 3 kings was so astronomically low it bordered on the impossible. You're full of shit. Owen suddenly spat, unable to bear the silence anymore. There is no investor. You called a buddy to stall for time. No legitimate businessman is going to drop $3 million on a card game in the middle of nowhere. We'll see in 5 minutes, I replied. Amelia reached under the table and squeezed my knee. I glanced at her. Her face was pale, but her eyes were fiercely determined. She had put her parents' house on the line for me without even looking at my cards. That kind of trust wasn't something money could buy. I gave her hand a reassuring squeeze. Dad was sitting in the corner, holding his head in his hands. My mom was rubbing his back, glaring daggers at Uncle Peter, who refused to meet her eyes. Suddenly, the roar of heavy engines cut through the quiet night. Headlights swept across the living room windows. The heavy crunch of tires on gravel signaled the arrival of multiple vehicles. Everyone in the room froze. Owen swallowed hard, his Adam's apple bobbing in his throat. The front door opened without a knock. 2 men in tailored dark suits stepped into the hallway, scanning the room with cold, professional efficiency. A second later, Marcus Thorne walked in. He was a large man in his 50s, exuding the kind of quiet, terrifying power that flashy upstarts like Owen spent their entire lives pretending to have. He wore a simple cashmere overcoat over a dark turtleneck. He smelled of expensive leather and an aura of absolute authority. Uncle Peter practically jumped out of his skin. Who are you people? You can't just walk into someone's house. Marcus didn't even look at him. His eyes swept the room, landing on the bedding table, the pile of cash, the car keys, and finally on me. Ethan, Marcus said, stepping forward. Mr. Thorne, thank you for coming. Marcus approached the table. He looked down at the messy pile of bets. He noticed the BMW keys, the jewelry, the cheap rummy chips. Then his eyes shifted to Owen, who was visibly trembling. Owen recognized him. Anyone who did business in the state knew who Marcus Thorne was. Mr. Thorne, Owen stammered, scrambling to his feet. He knocked his chair back. In the process, I didn't realize you knew my cousin. I'm Owen Thompson from Thompson Manufacturing. We submitted a bid for your warehouse project last year. Shut up and sit down, Marcus said casually, not raising his voice. Owen's mouth snapped shut. He slowly lowered himself back into his chair, his face entirely drained of color. Marcus turned to me. Let me see them. I lifted my hands, peeling back the corners of my 3 cards just enough for Marcus to see. Marcus stared at the cards for a long 3 seconds. A slow, dangerous smile spread across his face. He let the cards snap back down against the table. Well, Marcus murmured. He reached into the inner pocket of his coat and pulled out a leather checkbook. He clicked a heavy Montblanc pen and began to write. Mr. Thorne, Owen said, his voice cracking. With all due respect, this is a private family game. You can't just buy into the pot. Marcus paused writing. He looked up, his gaze locking onto Owen like a predator, examining a very small, very loud insect. Are there rules against outside staking in this game? Marcus asked. Well, no, but then I am backing Ethan's play, Marcus interrupted, his tone final. He tore the check from the book and tossed it onto the center of the table. It landed right on top of Owen's BMW keys. $3 million. Certified and drawn from a private wealth account. The raise is matched, Marcus said, pulling up a chair and sitting directly behind me, crossing his legs. Show your cards, boy. The living room felt like a vacuum. No one dared to breathe. Owen stared at the check. The zeros seemed to blur together before his eyes. The bravado, the arrogance, the condescending sneers, all of it had completely vanished, replaced by the stark, terrifying realization that he had stepped into a trap of his own making. He had tried to use his wealth to bully a poorer man out of a pot. Now he was the poor man at the table, sitting across from capital he couldn't even fathom. Show them, I commanded, my voice echoing loudly in the quiet room. Kylie grabbed Owen's arm, her perfectly manicured nails digging into his skin. Owen, what's going on? Show your cards. We have the winning hand, right? You told me you hit it. Owen didn't move. He stared at his 3 cards, lying face down beneath a porcelain plate. Sweat beaded on his forehead, rolling down his temples and dripping onto his collar. Owen, Uncle Peter shouted, his voice shrill with panic. Turn the damn cards over. Take their money. Before we reveal, Marcus interjected smoothly, pulling a folded legal document from his coat pocket. We make it official. Verbal agreements and throwing keys on a table don't hold up in court. My lawyers drafted a quick memorandum of wager on the drive over. Marcus's associate stepped forward, placing 2 copies of the document on the table, along with a pen. This states that you, Owen Thompson, are putting up your 2024 BMW 300,000 in cash, the jewelry currently on the table, the deed to your primary residence, and full ownership equity of Thompson Manufacturing, against the assets Ethan has wagered, plus my $3 million cashier's check. Marcus tapped the paper. Sign it. Both of you. I took the pen and signed my name without a second thought. I pushed the paper across the table to Owen. Owen looked at the pen like it was a venomous snake. Sign it, Marcus said softly, or you forfeit the pot right now. If Owen forfeited now, he lost the BMW, the $300,000 cash, and his wife's jewelry. For a man whose business was essentially running on credit and appearances to maintain his wealthy lifestyle, losing that much liquid asset would be a fatal blow. He had to sign. He was too deep. The sunk cost fallacy had its claws fully buried in his mind. With a shaking hand, Owen picked up the pen. He hesitated, looking at Kylie, then at his father. Finally, he pressed the pen to the paper and scribbled his signature. Good, Marcus said, his associate immediately retrieving the documents. The bet is legally binding. The pot is locked. Gentlemen, flip your cards. I want to see his first, Owen demanded, his voice bordering on hysterical. He's the one who called. I have the right to see his cards first. I shook my head. You raised. I called. Standard rules dictate the razor shows. First, turn them over, Owen. Let's see what gave you the guts to put your house and factory on the line. Owen's breathing was loud and ragged. He reached for the porcelain plate. His fingers trembled so violently he could barely grip the edges. He slowly lifted the plate and set it aside. He placed his fingers on the 3 cards. Come on, baby, Kylie whispered frantically, kissing her clasped hands. Show them. Show these peasants how it's done. Owen flipped the first card. The Queen of Hearts. Kylie cheered. He flipped the second card. The Queen of Spades. Uncle Peter pumped his fist in the air. Yes. A pair of queens. Read 'em and weep, you broke losers. Owen's hand hovered over the third card. He closed his eyes, taking a deep, shuddering breath. He looked like a man standing on the edge of a cliff trying to decide whether to jump. He snapped the third card over. The Queen of Diamonds. Yes. Kylie shrieked, practically leaping onto the table. She grabbed Owen by the shoulders and shook him. 3 queens. 3 of a kind. We won. Oh my God. We won. Uncle Peter let out a roar of laughter, pointing a finger directly at my father. Look at that. Look at that, you stubborn old fool. Your son just bankrupted your entire family. You're going to be living on the streets. I told you not to mess with us. I told you. Dad slumped entirely into his chair, a low groan escaping his lips. My mom covered her face, tears streaming down her cheeks. Owen slumped back in his chair, letting out a massive, euphoric exhale. The color rushed back to his face. He wiped the sweat from his forehead and began to laugh, a manic, unhinged sound of pure relief. 3 queens, Owen gasped, pointing at me. I had 3 queens the whole time. You arrogant little shit. You thought you could bluff me? You thought bringing in a heavy hitter would scare me off? I knew you didn't have 3 kings. Nobody gets 3 kings in a home game. He reached out to grab the cashier's check. Hands off, Marcus's associate barked, stepping forward. Owen recoiled, but his grin didn't falter. It's mine. I won it. Read the cards. 3 queens. I see the queens, I said, my voice cutting through the celebratory noise like a scalpel. I hadn't moved. I hadn't flinched. The room slowly quieted down, noticing my complete lack of reaction. What's wrong? Kylie sneered, leaning across the table. In shock. Can't process the fact that you just threw your fiancé's house away? Are you going to cry? I looked at Owen. The manic joy in his eyes flickered as he met my gaze. He saw the cold, dead certainty in my expression, and the smile slowly slid off his face. You said earlier, I began softly, that you picked on us because we were broke. You said we didn't have the guts to do anything big. You disrespected my father. You flaunted your wealth because you thought it made you untouchable. I placed my hand on top of my 3 cards. You wanted a big gamble, cousin. You wanted to see blood. I flipped the first card. The King of Clubs. Kylie laughed nervously. So what? A king. You need more than a high card to beat 3 queens. I flipped the second card. The King of Hearts. The laughter died in Kylie's throat. Uncle Peter took a step back, knocking into A side table. A lamp wobbled and fell, crashing to the floor. No one looked at it. Owen stopped breathing. His eyes bulged out of his head, locked onto the two kings. His jaw trembled. No, it's a bluff. It's a pair. You just have a pair. I picked up the final card. I didn't flip it immediately. I held it up, showing the back of the cheap, faded paper to Owen. When my dad lit your cigarette, I said, my voice dropping to a harsh whisper. You didn't cup the flame. You let him stand there like a servant. You think wealth buys you the right to treat your own blood like dirt. I snapped the card face up onto the table. The king of spades. 3 kings. The 3 faces of the monarchs stared up from the table, utterly indifferent to the absolute destruction they had just unleashed. For 10 seconds, the only sound in the room was the harsh, rattling intake of breath from Uncle Peter. Then Owen broke. He let out a sound that wasn't quite human, a choked, guttural wail of pure agony. He lunged across the table, his hands frantically clawing at my cards, desperate to find a smudge, a misprint, anything that would make the reality in front of him untrue. Fake. Owen screamed, spit flying from his lips. It's a rigged deck. He cheated. He palmed them. There's no way. There's no fucking way. Before his hands could touch my cards, Marcus's associate grabbed Owen by the back of the neck and slammed him face first onto the wooden betting table. The crack of bone against wood was sickeningly loud. Ah! Owen shrieked, his nose streaming blood over the pile of cash. Keep your hands off the cards, Marcus said, his tone entirely conversational. Owen! Kylie screamed, rushing forward. She grabbed the associate's arm, but he easily shoved her aside. She stumbled and fell to the floor, her designer dress riding up her thighs. She didn't bother to fix it. She stared at the 3 kings on the table, her eyes wide with a horrific, mind-shattering realization. The house. Kylie whispered, her voice trembling. The factory, the BMW. Everything they had was gone. In the span of an hour, they had gone from local millionaires to completely destitute. Worse than destitute, they were homeless. Uncle Peter staggered forward, his face an unhealthy shade of purple. He grabbed his chest, gasping for air. Ethan, please. Your cousins. We're family. You can't take his house. Where will they live? You can't do this. I stood up slowly. I looked at Uncle Peter, feeling absolutely no pity. Family? I asked. Where was that word when he was betting $500? A hand against people making minimum wage? Where was that word when you were laughing at my dad, telling him he should be grateful Owen let him light his cigarette? Where was that word 10 minutes ago when Kylie was trying to grab Amelia's necklace? Uncle Peter opened his mouth, but no words came out. Tears streamed down his wrinkled face. He looked pathetic. Dad walked up beside me. He looked at the table, at the 3 kings, and then at Owen, who was still pinned to the wood, weeping openly, blood and snot mixing on his face. Dad stood taller than I had seen him stand in years. Let him up, Dad said quietly to Marcus's associate. The associate looked at Marcus. Marcus gave a brief nod. The associate released Owen. Owen slowly pushed himself up. His designer shirt was ruined, stained with blood. He looked at my father, his eyes pleading. Uncle, please. Tell him it was just a game. Please. Dad looked at him with a mixture of pity and profound disgust. You made the rules, Owen. You demanded the stakes. A man honors his debts. Dad turned away, refusing to look at him any longer. Mr. Thorne, I said, pointing to the documents and the pot. The bet is settled. Marcus smiled. He stood up and buttoned his coat. Indeed it is. My lawyers will execute the transfer of the properties first thing on Tuesday morning. We will liquidate the factory and the real estate. 50% of the net proceeds will be wired to your account, Ethan. As for the liquid assets on the table, Marcus gestured to the BMW keys, the cash box, and the jewelry. Consider that your immediate cut. Thank you, Marcus, I said. Marcus nodded respectfully to me, then tipped his head to Amelia. A woman with nerves of steel. You hold on to her, Ethan. With that, Marcus Thorne and his men turned and walked out of the house. The heavy doors of their SUVs slammed shut, and they drove off into the night, taking Owen's entire empire with them on a piece of signed paper. The aftermath was a scene of absolute devastation. Kylie was on the floor, sobbing hysterically, rocking back and forth. She was ripping her own hair out, screaming at Owen between sobs. You idiot. You arrogant, stupid idiot. You gambled our home. You gambled my ring. Owen didn't respond to her. He was staring blankly at the wall, in a state of clinical shock. I reached out and picked up the keys to the BMW. They felt heavy and cold in my hand. I tossed them to Amelia. She caught them effortlessly. I then pulled the wooden box of cash toward me. $300,000. I closed the lid and locked it. Ethan, Uncle Peter whispered. He dropped to his knees. The sight of a man in his 60s kneeling on the floor was jarring, but it moved nothing inside me. I'll do anything. I'll work for you. Owen will work for you. Just give them the house back. Please. He has a child. He should have thought about his child before he tried to ruin my life too. Stroke his ego, I said coldly. He wanted to leave me in debt for the rest of my life. He wanted to bankrupt my family. He explicitly stated that he didn't care if we starved for 5 years. I'm just showing him the exact same mercy he showed me. I walked over to Owen. He flinched as I approached. I pulled a cigarette from my pocket. I placed it between my lips. I pulled out a cheap plastic lighter and tossed it into Owen's lap. Light it, I said. Owen looked down at the lighter. His hands were shaking so badly he could barely pick it up. He looked up at me, his eyes bloodshot and filled with a terror that would likely never leave him. He flicked the lighter. The small flame illuminated his ruined face. He held it up to my cigarette. As the flame touched the tobacco, I looked him dead in the eye. With his free hand, Owen slowly brought his palm up, cupping the flame to protect it from a wind that didn't exist in the living room. He cupped the flame. I took a deep drag, blowing the smoke out slowly. Now, I said, my voice echoing in the silent room. Apologize to my father. Owen turned to my dad. Tears openly spilled down his cheeks. I'm sorry, he sobbed, his voice breaking. I'm so sorry, Uncle. I was disrespectful. I was wrong. I'm nothing. Please forgive me. Dad didn't say a word. He just turned and walked into the kitchen. I took the cigarette out of my mouth and dropped it into the ashtray. I picked up the wooden box of cash and grabbed Amelia's hand. Let's go home, I said to her. We walked out of the house, leaving the wails of Kylie and Uncle Peter echoing behind us in the stale air. Outside, the night was cool and crisp. The stars were bright. We walked past my beat-up Buick and stopped in front of the sleek, black 2024 BMW. Amelia pressed the unlock button on the fob. The headlights flashed, illuminating the gravel driveway. I put the box of cash in the trunk. We got into the car. The leather seats were soft, smelling of expensive care. I gripped the steering wheel, the adrenaline finally beginning to leave my body, replaced by a deep, profound exhaustion, and an immense quiet victory. Are you okay? Amelia asked softly, placing her hand on my neck. I looked at her, at the woman who was willing to lose everything just to stand by my side. I leaned over and kissed her deeply. I'm more than okay, I whispered. I started the engine. It purred with quiet power. As we pulled out of the driveway, I looked in the rearview mirror. I could see the silhouette of my uncle's house fading into the darkness. We were leaving the toxic ties of that family behind forever. 6 months later, true to his word, Marcus Thorne's legal team dismantled Owen's assets with ruthless efficiency. The factory, which turned out to be heavily leveraged with secret debts Owen had been hiding, was liquidated. Marcus took his cut and wired my half directly into a trust fund set up. It wasn't quite the millions it looked like on paper after the bank took their chunk of the factory's debt, but between the sale of the house, the $300,000 cash from the box, and the BMW, I walked away with just over $1.2 million in clear liquid assets. I paid off my student loans. I paid off my parents' mortgage. Amelia and I had our wedding in late September. It wasn't an overly extravagant affair, but it was beautiful, held in a botanical garden in the city. My parents were there, beaming with pride. My dad wore a custom-tailored suit, and he had never looked younger or happier. Neither Owen, Kylie, nor Uncle Peter were invited. I heard through the family grapevine that Owen's life had completely collapsed. Without the house and the factory, his creditors descended like vultures. Kylie filed for divorce 3 weeks after the card game, taking whatever scraps she could hide in her personal accounts and leaving Owen to deal with the fallout. Uncle Peter had to come out of retirement to take a job as a night security guard at a local warehouse, just to help Owen afford the rent on a small, run-down apartment on the bad side of town. Owen himself was working as a mid-level salesman for a plumbing supply company. The arrogance, the flashy clothes, the condescending sneers, all of it had been beaten out of him by the brutal reality of poverty. He was a ghost of his former self, a man broken by his own hubris. Sometimes, when I'm driving the BMW into the city, I think about that night. I think about the sickening thrill of the gamble, the weight of capital, and how easily it can crush a man's soul. Money is a dangerous thing. In the hands of a fool, it is a weapon that inevitably turns on its owner. But in the hands of someone who respects it, who remembers what it feels like to have nothing, it is simply a tool. I never played 3-card brag again. I didn't need to. I had already played the greatest hand of my life, and I had taken everything.